Mocha Kanjani. My name is Batano Ngwendu. The streets kept me gorgeous Bushman. Welcome to Maak Season 3, Episode 2. Today, we're joined by Siswa Gcobisa. The streets call her G Misfits, but Umama Oti Gcobisa. Can you please tell the people what it is you do exactly?
What do I do?
What do you do?
I exist. That's what I do.
Of course.
I exist. I make art. I exist and I make stuff when I can with people that I enjoy. And I think that's literally where I like to cap, because the making of things come in very different forms. Sure. I don't necessarily like to be very specific about what it is that I make.
100%.
But I make things.
So, G, the maker of things. Let's take it back to the beginning. I mean, for many of us, we grow up sikhuliswa by umakhulu wethu, and primarily because our mothers end up being the breadwinners. Can you take us back to moments that you share with umakhulu? What is the house like? What is the food you're eating? What is the conversations about?
That's so crazy, because I grew up in such an odd way. I didn't necessarily, like, my life has been broken down into like multitude of different like ages, because I've lived with so many different people. Like, I was that kind of child. My parents were both so occupied with trying to make a living and trying to, come out better than their parents. So it was a thing of I lived with anyone who could take me in at the time. But my very first, I suppose, consistent place of home was my grandmother, which was my dad's mother.
Sure.
I stayed with her from how long, man? Like, I remember being in grade 1 and I was staying with her. Grade 2, I was staying with her. And she died last year. And we had such an odd relationship in the sense of like, it's like, when you come from Elokshin and you come from a family that is so big and so like different in like how big it is, because everyone kind of has their own thing. And my father was just one of the kids that actually managed to get by as opposed to everybody else. So that came with a lot of like weird energies, because I don't know what it is. A lot of the time in the black community, when someone is better off, they're labeled as thinking that they are better. So it was kind of, I was always bullied and always kind of made to feel smaller because I was somewhat in a better position. I went to, suburban school. My dad had a job, and it was like all these privileges made it really hard to exist Elokshin to a certain extent. But the weird part was that even in the suburban areas, you weren't really ever enough 100%. Either. So it was like this constant struggle of like, where the fuck do I actually, place myself, or where do I belong, or like all those kind of things. But my grandmothers, man, like, they were there, but they were not there. It's really strange.
You know what sense? Because I mean, like yonke into ihamba ngesandla sakhe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's so odd because I tend to gravitate towards saying that I raised myself.
Why do you think that is?
Because I had to figure it out myself a lot of the time. There were certain disciplines, obviously, like, when the light tricks or like come on, you have to be home.
100%.
You have to make sure the curtains are closed at a certain amount of time. All those responsibilities that girls have. But the weird thing about me was that I was never really girly. I was always super tomboy, super like running around with the boys, to such an extent where a lot of the time my grandmother, my dad's mom,
sure,
used to say that I like boys a lot. And in their context, it wasn't even like a platonic thing. They were just like, oh, you just wanna get in there like pretty early.
Showcase.
And it was never really like that. But that's how they translated my idea of hanging around boys a lot of the time. But umakhulu, man, umakhulu are all about early, like, I am an early riser because of my grandmothers, like through and through. I have this I'm a hoarder to a certain extent, and I know this is because of my dad's mom. And yeah, like there are so many, it's so crazy because I feel like the lessons that I remember, I often remember them in the moment. very difficult to be like, oh, this is what I learned and this is what I got from her. It's like certain memories that just come about, and I'm just like, oh shit, that happened, and like from that I got this lesson, or you know, it's never really a thing of like, when I grew up with my grandmother, this is what I was taught. I mean, this is what I was told, many things.
100%.
But I was never really a rule follower.
Okay.
Only to the extent of like making sure I'm not in trouble to a certain extent, but like I've always kind of done a lot of things my way.
Independently.
You know? And it was like, it's been a problem for majority of my life. But moving from place to place and not constantly having like a solidified home that you can go back to, you're kind of forced to find, you take what you can from the people you come across, but you have to somehow make it yours, because no one else is put in that space other than you. I was staying with my father's friends, I was staying with my mother's friends, I was staying like with cousins, I was just a sack of potatoes, man, just moving around everywhere. So yeah, I suppose I don't know.
So like hearing from like the deduction of your upbringing, like not being specific in one space, you kind of feel like that influences the person you are today.
Absolutely.
In terms of like not like being fixated in one situated place.
Yeah.
And do those emblems like follow you through and through wherever you go?
I think so, because even now in my adulthood, I don't think I've stayed anywhere longer than like 2 to 3 years. I'm just constantly kind of moving, and I've kind of gotten to the conclusion of like, maybe I need to be the kind of person that can work from anywhere in the world, because it doesn't seem like I'm the kind of being to be stuck in one. Although I literally was stuck in PE for, not necessarily stuck, but I lived there from birth till like 23. And I don't think that's ever going to happen again. I don't think I'm ever going to find myself in a place where I would stay that long ever again. But it is kind of weird because it has this strange sense of displacement. But I'm also starting to get in the habit of like home being me, you know? Like wherever I am is where home is, 100%. And not necessarily like where my grandmother is or where my mother is or like whatever. Because even when I go home now, like I don't have a place to stay at home. I have to like Airbnb or like stay with some friends or whatever. So I don't know, I feel like home is a figment of our imagination.
100%.
Literally up to you what you decide.
What is. So like back to the topic of your hometown, which is like now Gcobisa. You were a small town kid for like until you were 23.
Well, 22.
23. This is post university, right?
Yes.
With that being said, like what was like the biggest like fascinations that you had about coming to the big cities, and when you got here, like was it materialized in the way you imagined, or or how easy or how difficult was it to adjust to the new circumstances? Everything to be so free and exposed. I
didn't really have like aspirations per se, because it wasn't like, yes, I'm from a small town, but that wasn't always where I was. You know, I got to come to places like Cape Town. I got to come to places like Johannesburg, because I started working like first year I was already working. So I was managing like a certain amount of money that I could save. And I really, really like, my first concert that I went to was here in Cape Town. It was a Lil Wayne concert. I was 15.
Crazy.
And that was like the very first concert that I went to. And after that, I decided to make concerts a thing for me. Like it was like, I need that to be an experience that I can like be a part of. So I started saving up money for concerts. Whoever was coming through to South Africa, who I really, really enjoyed, I would try and make a plan to get there. So I made, you know, acquaintances, and I met people through those experiences, like me leaving PE. And it was easy because the cost of living there is very low. So you can save money, you go spend all your dollars and whatever in Johannesburg or Cape Town, you come back and you're still okay because the cost of living there isn't that expensive.
100%.
So it wasn't like this huge, big transition or whatever. It was just like a jumping into what was always meant to be, I suppose. It wasn't necessarily a jarring experience of like, oh my God, big city, big life. You know? So it was a very smooth transition. It wasn't like...
Do you think that smooth transition also transcends to people you meet? Because you're a nomad. Like, how is it making friendships, maintaining relationships? Because you're not constantly set in one place.
I got very, very lucky in the sense that my friends, like, I'm very like particular about how I categorize people in my life because
Sure.
I'm a very specific person about the kind of things that I need from myself and from the people that I find around me.
Sure.
So I have a very solid group of like anchors, and my anchors are like my best friends, and there's like 5 of them, right? And I've known them since like we go back high school days.
100%.
That's how far back we go. And then an extension of that are like homies, you know, those are people that I've met throughout like
The journey.
Johannesburg and Cape Town and
Sure.
whatever. Some of them not necessarily friends per se, but I know like if I find myself in a certain space, like I can count on them to a certain extent.
100%.
You know, so I don't really, I've invested quite a lot in my friendships, and if you are my friend, you will know that. But anything beyond that is kind of like, okay, no, we're homies, we're acquaintances, we work together or like whatever. So I don't really like solidify relationships to such an extent of like, okay, no,
100%.
we stuck together for like eternity.
Sure.
I can't do that.
Sure.
That doesn't make sense to me. Unless we've been kicking it for years or whatever,
yeah.
you know. But I have made a total number of probably like 3 friends outside of my solidified friendship
circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
So everyone else is a homie or an acquaintance, and
No offense, like it's all love, eh?
very
Sure.
very, yeah.
Sure. So
It's you can't get confused about those things because
Yeah.
like you come to cities that are big
sure.
and you realize that like the people you find yourself around or the people that you drink with does not necessarily mean that those people are your friends.
100%.
Right? And because I am very specific about that distinguishment,
Sure.
I don't really invest that much in like a lot of
Those yeah.
unless I need to.
Showcase. So yeah, I mean, your story of storytelling is something that's like been there since you were like during university, and it first started with like your interest in wanting to take photos, you know.
Yeah.
I understand you first got your first DSLR and you're like kind of fascinated about the whole thing, and at the time you were hanging around a lot of after kids, learning about the film industry. Why do you think you sort of gravitated towards that direction? I mean, you were like studying somewhat of a serious degree, which was very like theoretical, serious thesis kind. But then there's this other creative part of you that like kind of like birthed sort of like when you came onto university.
Yeah.
Or is it something that you already knew coming in?
I think it was something that I always knew, but I don't necessarily think I knew that it was possible.
Sure.
Because I have this thing now, I'm like, you know what? We get so mad at kids that lie, right? But actually, what if they are magnificent storytellers? Why are we punishing kids that lie? So why don't we find out what the reason?
But wait, there's a difference between lying and being pathological.
Yes, absolutely,
100%.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But have you ever been in trouble or like seen like a young boy in trouble and just see how quickly they spin a story to get themselves out of trouble?
I was one of those kids.
Like,
yeah.
How the hell did you do that?
Showcase,
you know?
yeah.
And usually you just get spanked and people just like leave you there. And it's like, wait, but like, what if there's like, why don't you give that kid a pen and see how many lies they can write and see what kind of story that comes up with?
Sure.
But I always grew up in a house where kubali sinzomi. You know, like God ganzomi at any given chance. If anyone's bored or whatever, it's raining outside, if you can't really play band or whatever, you just come through with God ganzomi. And I think that's where it kind of started. But I have a grandfather, my one and only grandfather, who I believe is the reason I actually got into the aspect of telling stories, is one of the greatest storytellers that I've ever met in my life. Like the amount of wisdom, the amount of words that man has, he's losing them a little bit now because he's like, you know, frail and old age is like doing its thing. But he was the one person who I was always intrigued by so much information stored in him.
Sure.
But like that's literally where it is and where it stays. It doesn't go anywhere beyond that. And whenever I'd be at home, like he'd be telling me these stories. Whenever I'd go visit, there would be another story, or he would repeat the same story, but it was just always intriguing. So I think definitely he's kind of the reason I am in it.
Showcase.
And I feel compelled to keep pushing through it because it's like I am very much interested in the idea that he has and the stories that he has to tell, but in a magnitude of how many more people in South Africa have that stored in their brains. And all it is stored in their brains.
100%.
And there's nothing really written or nothing really
recorded.
shot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think Fees Must Fall also had a lot to do with it because it was the first time I was part of something that was, I don't want to say revolutionary, but like very
I mean, it was a
pivotal.
It was a protest in your generation, and it's
absolutely
it's a common thing. Like you look at our parents, their protest was apartheid, and that sort of like morphed the people they are.
Exactly.
So do you think like during that Fees Must Fall time, you also kind of found your voice?
Well, I don't believe in finding things. I believe in more like creating them.
Okay, sure.
Like I can maybe find information from different places, but
sure.
I end up creating how I would like to exude whatever information that I've received.
Sure.
But I definitely think that was also like a thing of like, yo man, people need to know what is happening here, not just in the context of like UCT or in the context of like VITS. Like what the hell is happening in PE? What the hell is happening at the VAR? What is happening in all the other
small towns?
You know, small universities that don't necessarily get as much, limelight as how is this conversation getting distorted and how do we stop that? And in getting interviewed and getting like people asking like what's going on, people at the march like trying to get footage from the students, I was just like, this is a very interesting thing because some of them aren't necessarily students and they're just ejecting themselves into this narrative, and then it's a thing that doesn't really get translated the way that it needs to or a way that's conducive to the students. It
100%.
just becomes a thing. So yeah, my grandfather, Fees Must Fall, and I think maybe lying as a kid. I used to make up stories about my life. You know, I used to go to like, obviously going to a white school and all the kids come back from holiday and they've been to places like Neisner and they've been to like Plet and they've been to like all these fucking great holidays.
Sure.
And you're just like, okay, then I just have to make it up. Because like, all I've been doing, I've been a Lokshin Dalama Topi dog. I was not anywhere fancy or whatever. So you just find a way to make a way.
So with the midst of that encyclopedia and lies in the midst, you find yourself creating this, one of your first films, your first project was called Kwanobuhle, which is an exploration about Pantsula culture and like the focus is on attire. I saw in the trailer that's out on the internet, like the one gentleman expressed that Upantsula is not necessarily in the clothes we wear, but it's something that's in the heart. How would you describe your definition of what it means to be Impantsula, and what are those character traits that you implemented in your life?
I don't know if I can answer that question because I'm not Ipantsula.
Showcase.
You know? But based on my observation and what I learned from the process of actually doing the mini docu it was a sense of belonging. You know, people a lot of times don't really know where to inject themselves or where to find, because home doesn't necessarily attribute to family. Sometimes you find yourself being a black sheep, you find yourself not necessarily gelling with like the spaces you find yourself in. So people tend to find organizations, whether it be through sports or like dancing or like dressing or like whatever. You find whatever fits for you. And I think it's genuinely creating a sense of belonging for yourself. That's what it is, and creating a sense of identity, because at the end of the day, what you wear makes you who you are, you know, to a certain extent. So I identify more with being a misfit as opposed to being Ipantsula.
Showcase.
And that's just the influence that I've received from the Smith kids from a very like...
Okay, sure.
I think I was...
Get in depth.
When was it? I think I was like in grade 8. Grade 8, grade 9. I was like super obsessed with like Diggy Simmons and like Mindless Behavior and like Jaden Smith.
Okay, sure. The
like,
handwork era,
bro,
you know.
It was like that era
baggy
of like...
jeans.
Yo.
Yeah, sure.
And I took an interest in the Smith twins because they were so like intrinsic about the things that they were learning, and they were sharing what they were learning. And it was nothing that I ever knew. It was perceptions that I had no idea existed. Like sacred geometry was never a thing. I thought, what the fuck was that before I knew what it was? You know, crystals, like what? Stones, colorful. What is all of this information?
Sure.
And I kind of just there was a time where I was just wearing black every day of my life.
But you still do though.
I mean,
high key, you're wearing black right now.
I like switch it up now.
Okay, sure.
I switch it up. I wear like sometimes I wear different things. back in first year and second year, all I wore was black, like nothing else. Like every day, all day was just black.
It's been said that people who wear black is like associated with being an artist.
Really?
Because you pay attention at these runway shows, the person who designs the clothes will always come out in the most modest outfit, and it's usually bland, black, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's also like a thing among skating culture. If I stand to be corrected though, but black is sort of like that, you know, not subtleness, defining. Defining color. Attire, color.
But also the absence of color. I don't know. I was also into like really drawing on my clothes.
Sure.
So like wearing black made sense because I could just like
showcase,
you know, spaz out whenever I wanted to.
So do you think those sentiments that you expressed about being a misfit is also translated in your tattoos? Because I mean, you have the most random tattoos, but like everything has meaning, and she paid for none of them. Hey, that's the crazy part.
I paid for one because Cape Town is racist.
I bet.
This one. I paid for this one.
Sure.
More than I've ever paid for tattoo, but
sure.
I didn't pay for it.
Sure.
My partner did, so it was technically free. But my tattoos are like reminders to myself. Not all of them have meaning.
Sure.
But most of them do, because I need I'm a very anxious person, and I can be very I'm very in my head about it. So a lot of people don't really know when I'm freaking out, because I'm just very monotonous and I'm very like calm all the time. So I have to put reminders on myself because no one else is going to do it. And 100%. I also don't have the courage to stand there. I mean, sometimes I will just sit in my car and just talk to myself. The majority of the time, it's just like, what can I write? Where can I place it? Like, do I need to put it on my mirror? Do I need to put it on my door? Do I need to... So I'm just like, let me just put it on my body.
Sure.
That way it's with me wherever I go.
100%.
So, no, my tattoos aren't that random. They aren't that random.
Sure. So you've been in Cape Town for the past year and some change. And you came here obviously for employment purposes, but in the midst of you coming here for employment, you found home, you know? You've met your partner here. Was it something that you preempted that you'd get? Or
fuck no.
Describe that like creative, because your partner is also creative herself. In simple words, how would you describe that creative intimacy? Just like being able to create with someone and
that is
bounce
so
off
corny.
ideas. It's very corny, but I'm sure there's people who want to know.
I actually don't know. We just do it.
Sure.
And most of the time it's like a constant struggle of like, do you actually want to do this? Or like, are you just doing it for me? Or like, do you, you know? And I won't lie, I'm not the easiest person
to work with.
Yeah. Or to just be. Like, I'm just not. I'm a very complex human being. So sometimes if things are... I have a theory that I work alone, but I also have a theory that that's impossible, because I don't think I say it because I like it. I say it because I feel like I need to be able to do it. Because when you trust certain people to do certain things, they just don't bring the results that you
100%.
need a lot of times.
Yeah.
So I've kind of gotten into this idea that I just need to do everything myself, and that's not really conducive when you have people that can help you. Right?
Yeah.
Or like when I do have those people that can help me, if they do something weird like twice, I'm just like, you know what? Okay, let's wrap it up.
Sure.
It's fine. I'll
Showcase.
do it all by myself.
Showcase.
So it's usually I prefer to assist other people. As opposed to having myself assisted.
Showcase.
You know? But that's something I'm trying to grow out of.
Yeah.
Creating with a partner is it's very challenging. It's amazing in the sense that you have someone you can bounce shit off of, and someone who you will trust to be transparent about what what you are producing.
Sure.
I always say, I'm like, dude, I hope you're not just saying this looks cool because you love me. Like, I want you to be very honest and very, and it's always a matter of like, she's like the blueprint of like, oh, okay, then so like they will think it's cool.
Okay.
If you think it's cool, like they will think it's cool. Like it's done.
Showcase.
Like you are the decider in whether or not I can actually do this.
Sure.
She's very critical and she's super like, I think we both are, but yeah, it's great. It's great. It's challenging. It's growing. It's new. It's like very, very new. I've never been in a relationship with someone that I work with to an extent of like we like almost doing the same thing. She's also starting to do creative directing now, which is probably definitely going to be like directing. So it's like we kind of merging, but our perceptions are so different and our experiences are so different.
Yeah.
So we contribute different things to whatever we make individually.
100%.
Which I think is amazing.
100%.
I think.
So,
but yeah.
So like tapping in and putting perspective into the industry you are in the film industry. It is kind of like, or it's not kind of like, it is a boys club. And you find yourself constantly like going through these spaces, you know, having mental conversations with yourself, with the space itself. Yeah. But the question I wanted to ask you, like, what's your take on mentorship in terms of guiding someone into knowing and understanding the ins and outs of what the industry possess?
I think it's very important, and I don't think we have it. I don't think we have the correct level of mentorship currently. But I also
in the South African context?
In the South African context, in the film context. But it's also very tricky to say that because I can only speak on my experience and like my community's experience. Like there's far more people that might have great mentors, you know. But you know how reluctant some people are to go to therapy?
Sure.
And then therapy is like a process of, you don't necessarily find your therapist the first time you go. You sometimes have to go through maybe like 2 therapists to actually find the therapist that works for you. I think that's how it works with mentors as well. Because sometimes we think we know what we need and then we get to what we thought we needed and we realize, no, but this is not what I needed.
100%.
So it becomes a trial and error thing. I think it's very necessary that people have mentors. But I also think you should have the luxury of choosing your mentors because you, better than anyone, know what you need.
100%.
And I also think it needs to be an open relationship in that as much as you are being mentored, you are also teaching your mentor something. And that needs to be acknowledged. Where it's not a favor. You're not doing me a favor. 100%. And I don't have to, you know, jump how high whenever you say I must jump.
Sure.
It needs to be a valid and respectable union. And it needs to be a conversation that anyone that's part of that understands what's happening and what's trying to be achieved and what you know. It's but a lot of times people are scared of their mentors, or like it feels like there's a superior complex between you, your mentor, and yourself. So you can't be transparent about your experience, or you can't really tell them what you need because you're so scared you're going to come across stupid, or you're going to come across like, you know. But I think the language of it needs to change a little bit so that the experience is better, in my opinion. But it's definitely necessary and it definitely works because it's really good to see someone who is representational of like what you want to do it, and like take you through the process of doing it, and actually having you maybe not repeat the same mistakes that they did and all that shit. So yeah,
100%. So you've been in Cape Town, you've experienced life here. You've been in Joburg, but you never experienced life as an employee. What are the things that you learned in Cape Town that you're going to, or see for yourself that you might implement in your livelihood or next chapter that you're about to step into? Because I understand that your work here is done and you are moving to Joburg right now. What are the things and the lessons that you kind of learned in Cape Town that kind of stuck with you and that you primarily want for yourself to initiate when you step into a space like Mjozol?
Back yourself. I think that's what I want to like remind myself the most, because I don't know, man. I think we find ourselves in a lot of spaces sometimes that make it really hard to believe that we can do it, because it's so tough for people who already have so much, it seems like. And you come into a space and you have very little and you're just like, who the fuck do I think I am? How the hell am I going to actually pull it through without literally the tiniest of things? When people have half the shit, they literally struggling. Who am I to make it happen? but somehow you find yourself doing it in whatever way, because you meet certain people and you learn different things, and you just, you know, continuously equip yourself with different tools to make this thing happen, whatever it is. So I think it's definitely a sense of like backing myself and believing in myself.
Sure.
Even if I don't really believe in myself, I just need to tell myself that I believe in myself.
100%.
Because like what needs to be done needs to be done, and
100%.
it can't be done without you thinking you can do it. You need to think that you can do it at the
yeah.
very least. And also I think maybe to slow down. Like it doesn't have to be a race. It's not a rat race. It's not a sprint. Like it's a marathon. It's a process. It doesn't necessarily need to be slow, because I feel like Cape Town is slow. But you need to be able to take some time to be slow. Yeah, I think those are the two most. And community. I don't know if that's, I don't know, man. Like that's such a complicated thing, because sometimes it's also like that whole therapist thing of going through different people
Types
and different
of
things
people.
until you actually find
Your
a specific
people.
thing. And it's annoying because of how people glamorize a lot of things. We don't really understand that there are those processes of like, it's like a tally of like, okay, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, 1
Sure.
point, and then crossing it out eventually, and then solidifying yourself in a specific space. And sometimes we literally give up before we actually get to the point of cracking it, because it just feels so exhausting to keep on fucking trying.
100%.
But I read something the other day that was like, you know, once you understand that being an artist is actually being patient to the process, the process becomes a lot easier. You become a lot more at ease when you realize that it takes time.
So poetic.
Like it's literally, you just need to be patient. But I don't know. It's difficult.
I mean, I get that patience thing. I'm sure being in Cape Town also opened, how can I say, different parts of yourself that you never knew existed.
Definitely.
I mean, for the first time we saw you modeling. Shout out Art Club and friends and the whole entire family.
I think that was modeling. That was so
that was modeling, and you were in your comfort zone, like 100%. How was that experience? Is it something that you do again?
For a brand that I really love, yes. I think we've been family with Art Club for like probably like 4 or 5 years now. So it was like a thing of like, what, you need assistance? Like,
sure.
Cool. And I've kind of decided, because of the line of work that I do, I need to be able to put myself in those positions. I need to be able to, as much as I hate being in front of the camera, I need to understand what it's like being in front of the camera. I need to know what I'm dealing with when I'm casting someone and I need them to do something specific, you know? I need to be able to understand the challenges that exist in doing that, so that I can be somewhat thoughtful in how I direct them.
100%.
Somewhat thoughtful in what I require from them.
Sure.
And not in the sense of being a foreigner in what they're doing, but in the sense of like, I understand how difficult it is, because I myself have been in a similar situation. And this is how I was able to kind of like run through it, or like succeed in it. So maybe you can try it this way, or try it that way. So I'm very like open in learning, especially things that align with the craft that I'm trying to explore.
Sure.
And working with Art Club and friends was a breeze. Like it was just, it wasn't a concrete thing in the sense of like, oh, you're modeling now for like, you're part of like a modeling agency, or like, I just had to be myself.
Sure.
So it wasn't a difficult task.
100%.
I just had to be me, and they were just taking the pictures while I was being myself, and it was just like, cool.
Sticking to the conversation of like brands and fashion, you also did a fashion project for Xavier Zulu's upcycled denim wear. How was that experience like? I loved how you guys encapsulated everything in such a friendly manner, and obviously Lenzo being Lenzo. You know, how was that experience like? And also, like, was it intentional to shoot all the stills in film? And take me through that process.
Great. No, that was so amazing. It was like, so it was kind of very impromptu also. It was, I had no idea. It was like, oh, are we shooting something in the studio? Like, come through. And I was like, I have not shot in a studio before, right? I've never shot like in an actual like
studio, like white walls.
You know what I'm saying? And also, don't shoot stills. Like that's not. I don't. Someone.
Breathe.
But I don't shoot stills, but like, because of the amount of pictures I post on Instagram that I've shot, people seem to think that I do sometimes. But if you look at the pictures that I take, they are more
about
they're very
you.
candid.
Yeah.
They're very candid in their very like daily lives of whatever I experience in those given moments. They're not
100%.
necessarily planned out, conceptualized, like this is what we're doing.
Sure.
Let's get out there and do exactly this.
Sure.
Although I'm starting to explore that a little bit because my partner is a photographer, so I'm finding myself a lot in those spaces.
Sure.
But it was like a very calm and like relaxed thing of like we're shooting at studio. These are the things these are the garments that we're gonna shoot. Lenzo's gonna model them. And me being me, I had a point and shoot that recently broke that I'm so sad about.
Aww.
But I carried it everywhere, like,
Sure.
at all times.
Sure.
And I was gonna shoot the idea was to shoot a BTS video, and I would capture whatever I could with my point and shoot.
Sure.
And we got there. We actually did not really shoot that much on film.
Showcase.
We just ended up. Well, I just ended up using the film shots.
Okay.
But we shot like on a Canon.
Yeah.
That was theirs there.
Okay.
And there's like we have like so many pictures,
For
digital
real?
pictures that like I don't know if they'll ever drop.
At least like we would have somewhat of an archive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's like gang loads of images.
Yeah.
The experience was super organic. It was super, super great. It was first time working with Xavier.
Sure.
First time working with Lenzo in that context as well.
Sure.
And it was just a super breezy experience.
Wow.
Like it was great.
As I was crying in your DMs is exactly how you explained it to me right now.
It's really crazy though when you find people, when you work with people who kind of unrigid in their expression.
Okay.
It becomes a lot easier to move. It becomes a lot more flexible to
Sure.
pitch ideas, a lot more flexible
Sure.
to just do something crazy because
Sure.
there isn't this idea of how we want it to be. There's no structure. There's no like
100%.
shot list. There's no like there isn't that confinement. There's so much room to play and it makes the experience a lot more enjoyable
100%.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. I was so honored to be part of that.
Sure. There's one question that I really want to ask you also, like, what would you tell your younger self, like the one that was like doing the whole psychology degree, not knowing that school is actually a scam, like knowing what you know now, like what would your message be to her, like if you could put it in simple English?
Simple English. What will I speak in simple English?
Okay.
What would I say? I think I would definitely say trust your intuition. Like the first thing you think is probably the right thing.
Right thing, yeah.
Right? Because what I find myself doing a lot of the time and what I did a lot of the time back then was the first thing I thought I ignored because I was like, you're just being ambitious or you just like, want things that are way far ahead of you or way bigger than yourself or like, it's just don't doubt your intuition. Don't do that. Don't do that because you actually end up regretting that you did that. I don't know, my intuition's wild, man. Like a lot of the time the things that I think happen exactly how I think them,
sure,
but I convince myself no.
Showcase.
Or like, and my homies actually said at some stage, we've always told you to just maybe like think things through a lot of the time, and I think that's what made you not tap into your intuition as much as that you needed to. So it's always like, I know it.
Sure.
But everything around me is like, but give it another thought.
Sure.
But give it another try. But give it a different approach. And then I end up doing it another way as opposed to the way that I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, stick to your guns.
Sure.
Trust your intuition.
You read a lot. I take it like you read.
Not enough.
Not enough. What's your current read right now?
I'm currently reading a Sanduma for Gang, like, cute little book thingy.
Okay.
And Zeg's Ways of Dying.
Tell people about Zeg's. They don't know. These kids watching, like, they need to be educated about individuals like Zeg's.
It's actually the first book that I'm reading by Zeg's.
For real?
I have not really explored him very much.
Sure.
But he's a South African author, very smart guy as far as I know. I'm only on like the second chapter.
Showcase.
I've tried to like, I've been trying to not really read fiction as much because there was a time when I was younger, in my high school days, all I read was fiction.
Sure.
Like it was all
fiction.
And it wasn't even really South African fiction. It was like your Daniel Steele, your Jodi Picoult, like all those super white and super like far-fetched stories that are just not part of my reality. So as I grew older, I was kind of more interested in not even like autobiographies per se, but more like philosophical, self-help, indigenous knowledge kind of books.
Sure.
So I've been like trying to finish Credo Mutua's Indaba is, which is
it's a complex book, eh?
It's
I was trying to convince my friends to get that for my birthday. But I wasn't successessl in that.
But I don't think anyone should hold themselves at any like standard to it. Like take your time with it.
For real?
I think so. Because there's so many chapters, there's so much knowledge in it. There's so much, it can take you a long time to read that book. But just try and make it a point to finish it. I do want to finish it though. I really do want to finish it.
Incredible storyteller, like,
you know?
Like incredible storyteller, like the original like storyteller.
And then you research on people like that, and you find out how fucking tired they were from trying to assist this country or like the people of this country, and you're just like
did it on the highest level. Like this is a person who knows. It's crazy.
Like beyond these wrongs, that nigga knew things, and you like and in one of his documentaries, it's just like, you know what, South African people can do whatever they want to do. I am tired of like speaking my truth and having my house burned down and having like people call me names and people doing things and
trying to assassinate me,
bro,
assassinate my spirituality,
bro.
It's crazy.
So I sit there and I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, what are we even doing? Like, is it even possible to do it? Because like, shit. But then you're just like, I have taken that knowledge and I'm doing something with it. So there will be someone else who decides to do it. Hopefully.
100%.
But I don't know, man. Read things. Don't have me tell you about.
Sure.
Just like.
That's the best way of doing it. Yeah, 100%.
Or Google.
Nah, reading is like the way.
No, at least Google to kind of like gauge what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
And then like do your thing. But there's no, oh my God, everyone needs to read. Everyone should be reading. Like all the time.
I feel you. I've kind of disliked reading because I grew up like in my mom's a librarian, so the only thing I would be getting when she gets back from home was like books. So as a kid, I was like bombarded with it. So right now, as I'm growing older, I'm definitely gravitating to things that is obviously a representation of who we are and gives us insight of, you know, knowing self. Such as your Credo Mutuas, specifically him. But read, guys.
No,
read.
Like it's. I definitely get the disinterest because even at school, they force you to read. And sometimes the books that they actually want you to read are good books. Yeah. But because you are forced to read them, it gives a whole different, like...
We matriculated the Hamlet and Othello. So it's colonial. So you can't necessarily... Okay, the storytelling in the love context is good, but...
Maybe not. Like, I read... when I found out about George Orwell...
Okay.
I found that out in school. When I read... What's this book? Animal Farm. That was a fucking great book.
100%.
In my opinion,
100%.
Right?
Life of Pi. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there are some valid books there.
Sure.
Well, when I was in school, like fucking, I don't know how long ago. Like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But you can flesh out. You can find something there somewhere.
Yeah.
But they definitely ruin it for you.
Showcase.
But it becomes a thing of like there are certain experiences that you won't necessarily get unless you actually open a book and read. Like I don't know if I'll ever get to meet Bell Hooks. I have no idea. Yeah. But Bell Hooks has so many books that I could read from. And that's how I can learn more about Bell Hooks or Bell Hooks' opinion.
Exactly.
Or like whatever.
Yeah.
You know? I might never really ever meet Usman Sembene. I mean Usman Sembene is dead. Like he's not even alive anymore. But I can watch films and I can read books and I can read texts that come from things that he spoke about and gain a certain level of knowledge there. So it's a necessary thing. You can hate it, but it needs to be done. And also it's one of those things where you just have to push yourself through. Like you can hate it for 5 days. On the 6th day, you've cracked it. You just have to commit.
Sure. No, 100%. In conclusion, like what's coming next? Going to Mjozolo. Sign with a very, very, very handsome agency. Won't give you the details. You just have to. The work will do the talking.
It's not an agency though. It's a production company.
Production company. Sorry, there I got the lines blurred. What's coming next? What's the excitement for going to Johannesburg? I'm
excited to work.
Showcase.
Not that people in Cape Town don't work, but like people in Joburg work like in a different capacity.
Sure.
In a very, very fast and very consistent, pattern, and I really, really appreciate that. Even though I find moments in like I need to tap out, it's like it doesn't stop. Even if I tap out, it still continues. Therefore, my money can make itself when I've tapped out, but like I can still tap in and whatever.
Sure.
But that's not necessarily the appeal. It's not necessarily the money, but it's more the energy. I don't know what's next, man. I don't know. I do know that I will probably be one of the best directors in the country, though.
Talk your shit.
That I can be sure of.
Sure.
In the next 2 to 3 years, I will definitely be one of the best directors in this country.
Makwande.
Without a doubt.
Makwande.
Without a doubt. That's all I can tell you that's coming.
Sure.
How it's going to come, when it's going to come.
You have no full blueprints you can express. Yeah, 100%.
The universe knows what it's got going.
Eish.
And I will not contaminate or like fuck with that.
3,000%.
It's just
Gee,
it's happening.
Gcobisa, man, for availing yourself and having a conversation with me. I think it's something that has been long overdue in the sense that I know that you are someone who has a lot to say, but this is kind of like the first step into introducing that conversation to the world, and obviously gradually as you grow old as a person and grow old in the creative arts that you're in. Thank you. Keep going.
Thank you.
You are anchor for many. You might not know that, but thank you so much. Shout out.
Thank you. That was nice and sweet and short.